Much, Chairman Rubio, and thank you for your leadership in a very powerful statement and for convening this extremely important and timely hearing. China, as we all know, has the world's largest number of Internet users, as well as the most sophisticated and aggressive Internet censorship and control regime. I would remind my colleagues that back on February 15th, 2006, I convened a hearing, the beginning of a series of hearings. This one was called The Internet in China, Tool for Freedom or Suppression. Well, the jury's in. It's not a tool for freedom. It's a tool for suppression. Yes, some people are able to communicate and bypass some of the regulators, the people who are ubiquitous in trying to uncover and to, unfortunately, hurt the human rights movement there. But it has become, especially under Xi Jinping, a tool for massive suppression. The Chinese government spends $10 billion on maintaining and improving their censorship apparatus. The U.S. government has an annual Internet freedom budget of $55 million, and Congress still has little idea as to how this money is being spent. And I know Ms. Lantos is shaking her head because she has raised this issue so many times in the past. Over the past year or so, Chinese companies were ordered to close websites and hosted discussions on the military history and international affairs and cracked down on illegal VPNs. Apple was forced to remove VPNs from China's App Store. New regulations were announced restricting anonymity online, and the Chinese government rolled out impressive new censorship technologies, censoring photos in one-to-one WeChat discussions and disrupting WhatsApp. Beijing has also deployed facial, as you pointed out, Mr. Chairman, and voice recognition, artificial intelligence, and other surveillance technologies throughout the country, but particularly targeting the Uyghur ethnic minority, where between 500 to 1 million Uyghurs have been detained arbitrarily. The Chinese government and the Communist Party's attempt to enforce and export a digital authoritarianism poses a direct threat to Chinese rights defenders and ethnic minorities, and poses a direct challenge to the interests of the United States and the free international community. The U.S. must recognize that we are engaged in a battle of ideas in a revitalized dictatorship, online, in the marketplace, and elsewhere, and we need to up our competitive strategies and our game to meet this very, very serious challenge. The administration's national security strategy says quite clearly that the Chinese government and the Communist Party, along with Russia, seek to, quote, challenge American power, influence, and interests, attempting to erode American security and prosperity. They are determined to make economies less free and less fair, to grow their militaries, and to control information and data to repress their societies and expand their influence. The Chinese government and Communist Party is using economic inducements and penalties, influence operations, and implied military threats to persuade other states to heed its political and security agenda. China gathers and exploits data on an unrivaled scale and spreads features of its authoritarian system, including corruption and the use of surveillance, close quote. The Chinese government and the Communist Party wants to shape a world that is antithetical to U.S. values and interests and to export its economic, political, and censorship models globally. In response, the U.S. and like-minded allies must stand resolutely for freedom of religion, fair and freer trade, labor rights, an end to the coercive population control programs, freedom of navigation, the rule of law, and freedom of expression, including online. A coherent and engaged Internet freedom strategy must be a critical part of the U.S. diplomatic toolbox. This strategy should have at its core a commitment to protect fundamental freedoms, privacy, and promote the free flow of news and information. But it is not a matter of just having a strategy. It should be the right one. The Bush and Obama administrations pursued cyber diplomacy, yet Internet freedom has declined around the world. Privacy is increasingly under threat, and the free flow of information has become more endangered. The right strategy must start with some humility. Cyberspace is a place to spread democratic ideals and a place where criminals, extremists, corporations, traffickers, and governments exploit vulnerabilities with impunity. Online communication can convey our highest ideals and our worst fears. It can shine a light of repression and be the source of hatred, manipulation, fake news, coercion, and conflict. It can bring people together, or it can push us apart. Despite all of this, I agree with the NSS's conclusions, which says the internet is an American invention, and it should reflect our values as it continues to transform the future for all nations and all generations. A strong, defensible cyber infrastructure fosters economic growth, protects our liberties, and advances our national security. Central to a revitalized U.S. internet freedom strategy should be a priority to open gaping holes in China's Great Firewall. As we remember with Radio Free Europe years ago, it wasn't soundproof. Remember those ads when I was a kid growing up? Well, the Great Chinese Firewall can be penetrated, but it has to be a very focused and aggressive and smart strategy. I'm not confident that the policy of the Broadcasting Board of Governors or the State Department has met that test at all. I think there are certain goals we should prioritize in our internet freedom strategy, which would include: 1, China's netizens require easy, reliable, and free access to uncensored information through anti-censorship technologies so that anybody can freely assess information regardless of their technical ability. Reliable solutions should work all the time, regardless of intensified crackdowns or major events like party congresses or the June 4th anniversary of Tiananmen Square. Solutions should present difficult choices for the Chinese authorities. If the authorities want to disrupt these solutions, then they must disrupt many online services, which they would normally be hesitant and unlikely to block. Access to solutions should also come at no cost for the Chinese netizens. The Chinese authorities often block access to payment providers, so even if Chinese can afford a circumvention solution, they cannot get past the censorship by their payment provider. Holistic anti-censorship solutions should be encouraged, including not just technical circumvention, but also distribution of those tools, getting around Google Play being blocked, and censorship in the Apple App Store, as well as helping others share anti-censorship tools, as well as content through messaging apps, social networks, and QR codes. These are just a few of the examples. I can say to my colleagues that, in the years past, I've introduced the Global Online Freedom Act. We're going to be reintroducing that shortly, updated and hopefully responsive. Unfortunately, it's been sent to several committees. While we've gotten it out of the Foreign Affairs Committee in the past, Ways and Means and Financial Services on the House side have been less reluctant because of the pressures coming from the industries that weren't for it. I would note parenthetically as well that Google used to be against it, and then about midstream a couple years ago came out in favor of it. So hopefully there is hope that we'll get some support there. But above all, I think we just need to pass that or something like it in the very near future. I yield back, and I thank you.